Hey guys, back with another video, another series review. I haven't done one of these in a while. In fact, the last one I did was the Mega Man series review. So continuing from that, I'm going to do the X series review. So I'm going to be talking about Mega Man X to Mega Man X8. Like with the other series, this might only be a two-part. I'm not sure, depending on how much or how long I talk about these games. But I'm guessing like this part's going to be Mega Man X to X4, second part X5 to X8, and the third part like a ranking from my least favorite to my favorite game in the series. The Mega Man X series. I really enjoy the Mega Man X series. It's my second favorite like Mega Man series after the classic series. Now the classic series, the reason why the classic series is my favorite is because it's all run and gun gameplay. There are like storylines to each of the games, but it's very it the storylines are never all that serious. And they're kind of endearing in a way where the X series has a bigger focus on story, and I really don't find like the overarching storyline like of the X series to be all that great, especially later where they absolutely fucking ruin the series, at least ruin the story with X6. So it's one of those things even as a kid I didn't pay much attention to it. The Mega Man series in general is a series I've played for the gameplay. I really enjoy the gameplay to these games. So that's what I'm going to be mostly focusing on. I might touch on the story here and there with some of these games. It's one of the reasons why the Mega Man Zero series, I don't care for that series because it's so focused on story and you're constantly being interrupted by dialogue and it goes on forever and ever. And well, of course, there's also like really gimmicky mission design in those games, but like to me, a platformer when a platformer focuses on story and you're constantly bombarded by text, especially a story that's not very good, it just really aggravating to me. So yeah, Zero series is not really one of my favorites, so don't expect a series review on that. But the X series, despite my issues with like the storytelling of these games, it's still not too bad, especially with the earlier X games. And the gameplay in them is fantastic. There's a lot of cool changes from the classic series to the X series. I'll talk about that with the first game in the series, which I'll talk about right now. Mega Man X. This was not the first game I played in the X series. This was, I think, the second game that I played in the X series. It was the only one I owned on the Super Nintendo back in the day. So when I look at the entire X series, it probably is the one I played most. And I think you ask a lot of people, they'll tell you it's their favorite in the X series. And it's an amazing game, especially when you compare it to the classic series. Going from like did Mega Man 6 come before X? I don't know actually the release dates too much, but Mega Man 6 might have actually came out after X. But like you compare Mega Man 7 on the Super Nintendo with X, and it's pretty mind blowing the stuff X was doing. For one, the visuals in this game, like some of the best visuals on the Super Nintendo, and back in the day, this was insane. Super detailed, really cool backgrounds, and the characters, the sprites had a lot of detail to them as well. I think one of the main differences with the X series in the original series is how much action there is in these games. Of course, one of the big things with X, there was a lot of differences, but you had parts that you'd equip on X as a character. You'd find like Dr. Light's capsules. So one of the things that brought to Mega Man X was the ability to climb on walls and do dash jumps. And this changed the game in so many different ways compared to the original series. And for one, I think it made boss fights a lot more enjoyable. I think the boss fights in general in the X series are better than the original series because the wall climbing ability gives you a lot more options in battle. And just the bosses themselves had a bigger variety of moves. And the level design was pretty interesting in ways too. I think the wall climbing changed the level design in some interesting ways. And Mega Man X had the best examples. It being the first game, they could really kind of show what they could do with this new gameplay style. I mean, it's generally similar to Mega Man, run and gun platforming. but there's just a lot of new things you could do with this wall running. Of course, you had, you know, the ability to upgrade your Buster. It still had the Mega Man formula where you tackled bosses, they gave you a power, and you use that power against other bosses. But I don't know, Mega Man X was different. It was something different, and it was different in a good way. So it back in the day, this was amazing, and I played this game to death. It's now in terms of difficulty, it's probably one of the easier games in the X series, and because it's the first one, it is the perfect place to start if you haven't dived into the X series. And honestly, in terms of story, it probably has my favorite story out of all the X games. I don't want to really say too much on it, but it's you know, there's a lot of good moments, especially when you reach like the fortress stages. There's a lot of cool story moments, and of course, this game introduced Zero, which is a great character. I love Zero as a character. I think he's great. So yeah, the music is fantastic in this game. One of the, I guess, the differences with the X series and the original series is the music in these games is a lot more like hard rock, heavy metal, but it's still like really catchy and still fantastic. The bosses this time around, instead of Robot Masters, you have Mavericks, which are kind of like animals, which is interesting. It's something I kind of actually do like. So you have like what, like Chill Penguin, what was that? Launch Octopus, yeah, all these kind of weird kind of bosses. The level design in Mega Man X was fantastic. In terms of bosses, I guess my favorite is probably, in this game at least, I think some of the later bosses are a bit more interesting than in Mega Man X, but Sting Chameleon is probably my favorite. He's one of the harder Mavericks in the game. Chill Penguin is always the guy you go for first, obviously, because you get the boots in that stage. But yeah, I mean, X is just a really polished, fun game from start to finish. In fact, it's one of those games that I really have a hard time saying anything bad about it. It's pretty much a flawless run and gun platformer, and a great start to this series. So yeah, definitely a fantastic game. Of course, after Mega Man X, we had X2. And actually, one thing I want to mention before I talk about X2, another new thing with Mega Man X was energy tanks. In the original games, you found energy capsules that kind of restored you to full health as soon as you used one. And in some of the games, you could have like 9 at any given time, which made those games pretty easy, at least some of them. In Mega Man X, they kind of made it a bit more interesting where you had 4 energy tanks, and you had to pick up health pickups. Like if you were at full health and you picked up a health item, it would be added to your energy tank, and you'd fill up your energy tank. And when you use the energy tank, then you fill up to full health. So in a way, I appreciate the idea where it actually makes the game more challenging and requires some effort if you want to get those energy tanks filled up. But at the same time, it adds a bit of grind to the game. Obviously, you can really challenge yourself and try to get through the game without using energy tanks. But in each game, you kind of have to find a grinding spot where you just kill enemies over and over again to fill up your energy tanks, and that's never fun to do. So I can see some people really liking the energy tanks because it definitely makes these games a bit more challenging. But at the same time, it adds that grinding element that I'm not a big fan of. But X2, let's talk about X2. Again, like I played this game back when I was a kid on the Super Nintendo. I only ever rented it though. I rented it constantly, but I didn't really. I never owned this game, and if you look on eBay, this game's getting really pricey. Mega Man X can still be had for like $20 to $30, card only. X2 is I think up to like $70 or $80 now. Way more if you want like a boxed copy, and that's one of the frustrating things. Like Mega Man games just really hold their value. Like it's like they just get more and more expensive, which sucks. It's really unfortunate. But so yeah, if you want like a physical copy of X2, it's gonna cost you. But X2, I love this game. In fact, I prefer it over Mega Man X. I'm kind of spoiling the list a bit here, but yeah, X2. I mean, it's a lot of people complain that it's not too different from Mega Man X, but like with the original Mega Man games, I don't really mind the next game being kind of similar. I'd much rather it be similar but still high quality in terms of level design and things like that than a game trying to do something drastically different and then failing. And maybe later we'll get to that kind of thing. But X2, yeah, it's generally more of the same. But I actually find this game to have, I think the level design is a bit more like fun in my opinion. And there's some cool things they added in X2. The story is not terrible. I don't think it's as good as X's, and there's a lot of weird things to the story. And before stages, you have like these massive text dumps, which it's a bit annoying, especially if you just want to like play the game for the gameplay. And on repeat playthroughs, you have to just keep mashing the A button through all this text. That's not really all that interesting, like the second or third time through this game. And I've beaten this game like many times. And I went through all of these games once more before this series review to kind of refresh my memory on things. In playing through X2 again, I had a blast with this game. But there's three like villain characters in this game, and what they'll do, they'll like drop into the 8 of the stages that you go to, and you can find like hidden doors to these bosses, these villain bosses, and if you defeat all three, some different things happen later in the game. So there's like this optional thing that this game has to it where there's a lot of replay value. I think there's like a good amount of replay value in this game with those three villain characters that you can fight in the actual Maverick stages. So that's really cool. And there's X had the I think it was like the Hadouken in Mega Man X. And there's another Street Fighter move in X2 that's a lot more difficult to get, but it's really satisfying to use when you do find that. The Mavericks themselves, I think, are still kind of interesting. There's some weird ones, like Wire Sponge is a very strange Maverick. Easily the easiest boss in the game, too. I always go for Wire Sponge first. But yeah, generally it's kind of more of the same, though. You start with the dash jump in this game. So you're able to climb up walls and do a dash jump right off the bat in this game, which I really like. That's one of the few things that annoyed me a bit about X is the fact that you pretty much have to go to Chill Penguin stage first every time you play it, where this game, there's more options available to you. I think this game, on the whole, is a more difficult game than Mega Man X, especially in the Fortress stages. The soundtrack I actually like better in this game, too, this is going to be an unpopular opinion. It's a bit less hard rock metal than the original, but it's got this... It's really hard to describe, but it's got a certain sound to it, the soundtrack in this game, that I really like. There's like a Overdrive Ostrich stage, has like a motorbike section that doesn't last too long, but it's still fun. You can tell they were trying to do a few new things, but generally it is kind of the same style of game, but I don't mind so much, especially when I think everything this game does, it does like slightly better than the first game. I'd say the final boss is probably one of the easiest final bosses in the X series. But other than that, I think the game is a bit more challenging overall. I mean, there's not much I can really say about X2 all that much. Obviously, the green biker dude became like a meme in the beginning intro. But yeah, it's just a really enjoyable follow-up to Mega Man X, which I can understand that some people might not like it as much, especially since it's doing just more of the same. But to me, it was always like, to me, it's like every time I play X and X2, I always seem to enjoy X2 just slightly more. And I have really fond memories of it, a lot of nostalgia for this game. So yeah, I have seen some hate for this game, but I don't know. I think it's generally a great game, and it was only the second game in the X series, so I didn't feel fatigued by it in any way. So yeah, X2 really really enjoyable. And next we had Mega Man X3. Now, this I consider the most underrated game in the series. This game, I am shocked at the amount of hate this game gets, because I actually think this is a fantastic entry into the series. And they actually, unlike X2, they actually did change a few things. I think the most notable thing are the ride armors. You can find different ride armors in this game, and each one behaves differently. And you can use them to like unlock secrets in the stages to find like extra heart tanks and extra capsule, Dr. Light capsules. And I thought this was actually really cool. You don't use them all that much, to be honest. And I think maybe some people were turned off by, having to actually search for that kind of stuff. In fact, like X3 has a lot more hidden secrets than X2 and X1 did. So I think maybe people were turned off by that and just kind of wanted to blaze through the game. Um, and they're I don't think they're super necessary, but X3 is generally considered to be one of the hardest games in the series. I actually disagree. It is fairly challenging, especially in the beginning, because bosses in this game do a hell of a lot of damage to you, and you don't start with too much health. I actually didn't really mention like the heart tanks in the X series, where you don't start with like a full health bar in the X series. You got to find heart tanks in the stages to increase your maximum health, which I actually really like. In fact, that in general, like the X series, there's more hidden secrets. The levels aren't just like straight linear levels. You got to actually do some searching to find like energy tanks and heart tanks, and I thought that was I thought that was a nice change between like the classic series and the X series. But yeah, X3 has a ton of hidden shit, which I can understand maybe people being turned off by that, especially on repeat playthroughs where you have to go for that stuff again. And if you don't get any of that stuff, yeah, this game might actually be the hardest in the series. If you just play it right from the beginning with no heart tanks or energy tanks, then yeah, it can be fairly difficult. But I don't know. I think the difficulty is kind of over exaggerated with X3. Especially later in the game. Like I think the castle stages are actually really easy. The final boss though is hard. The final boss is quite difficult, and there's a bullshit moment at the end which I fucking hate. It's probably my least favorite part of this game. I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's really cheap. It's really cheap, especially since on your first time through. I don't think you're gonna be expecting it to happen. The shit that goes down in that final stage. The plot is really stupid. This is when like the plots for these games got really dumb. There's not really much more to say. The plot's really dumb, and I don't really care about it too much. You do get to play as Zero in this game, but it's actually not that cool because you can only play him in the stages. You can't actually fight bosses with him. You can't collect power-ups with him, which that's kind of sucks. But for the times you do get to play him, it's really fun. Another thing, if you do end up actually getting killed with Zero in a stage, you can never use him ever again, which that kind of sucks too. But I don't know. I really liked all the hidden secrets in this game. I think the level design's still really good. Run and gun, just really action packed, really fast. I liked a lot of the power ups in this game, and I did like the challenge to it. X2 and X2 I thought were a bit on the easy side, so it was nice to have this game come around and kind of up the challenge. And okay, maybe I'm being a bit unfair because this is a very nostalgic game to me. This was the game that introduced me to the X series. I rented this way back in the day, and a little funny story here. I first played the intro stage, and obviously I was really surprised by like how much faster the game was in general. But I kind of played it like an original Mega Man game. So eventually I got to a part where there was a wall, and I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. It looked like I had to go up, but I couldn't figure out what to do. So I was stuck here for, I want to say, at least a couple hours. And I, of course, I rented the game, so it didn't come with a manual. So I was so confused. Until that moment, I decided to jump against the wall, and all of a sudden, I found myself climbing up the wall. And, I didn't have internet or anything like that, so I didn't know that was a thing in this series. So as soon as that moment happened, it was like this mind-blowing moment to me. I was like, what the hell? I could climb up walls? So it probably wasn't the best game to start with in that sense because I didn't even know these games had wall climbing, and it took me forever to realize you can do that. And the same with the long jump too. I didn't know you could do that. So a lot of the stages in the game would have moments where you had to get over a large pit, and I didn't know what to do. So I had so many stages I couldn't beat. So I rented this game over and over again, and it took me a while to actually beat this game for the first time, but I did eventually do it. So yeah, it's a nostalgic game to me. It introduced me to this series, so that might be a big part of why I enjoy this game so much. But I find myself just really loving this game every time I go back to it. The music's fantastic as well. Gravity Beetle's stage, the music in that level is so fucking good. So yeah, X3 definitely my pick for the most underrated game in the series, and one I recommend a lot of people play because I can tell you, I definitely think this is a lot better than some of the later entries that I'm going to talk about soon. Now, the next game, Mega Man X4. But before I talk about Mega Man X4, there's a couple things about X3 I forgot to mention. For one, that game on Super Nintendo is insanely expensive now. And this is one of those things that's actually pissed me off. Because People always shit on X3. I swear, most Mega Man fans I know don't like X3 or don't even bother playing it all that much. Yet it really bothers me to go on like eBay or whatever and see this game go for so much money. And admittedly, I think it's because like Capcom didn't do like a massive print run of this game. They didn't make many copies, and it has some kind of chip in it, like some special kind of chip that's I think only used in Mega Man X3. So I think a lot of people think like that's one of the reasons the game's so expensive, just because it's a rare, one of the rarer Mega Man games, and it really sucks because I want a copy of this game for Super Nintendo, but it's like this game is like $150 for a cart, like 500 plus for a boxed like complete copy, which is that's just fucking ridiculous. And I don't know, it just kind of angers me a bit because like no one seems to like this game, and it's like I don't know. I don't know. Yet it's the most expensive. I think it pretty much is the most expensive Mega Man game. I think, and I don't know. It kind of bugs me. Maybe I don't know. I don't know why. Just because I hear so much shit on this game, and then you go on eBay and it goes for a ridiculous amount of money. And I'm sure most of the people that buy this game don't even play it. They just have it sit on a shelf, which I don't know. It's a bit sad. I think. Also, there is a Saturn and PS1 version, I think. I think they only released it in Japan, but the Mega Man X collection uses the PlayStation version of X3. And that is just not the ideal way to play this game. I mean, it's generally the same game. There's like some anime cutscenes, I think, from what I remember, but the soundtrack is completely changed, and it's terrible. Like, the soundtrack in the PlayStation version is awful. Like, it's hard to explain. Like, it's really like I don't know. It's just really weak. Like the Super Nintendo version had like a very hard rock metal soundtrack, but the PlayStation version just kind of I don't know. It's awful. So I mean, if you try to play the Super Nintendo version, I think this game is on Virtual Console now though, which is good finally. But yeah, unfortunately, if you want an original Super Nintendo cartridge, you're gonna have to pay a lot of money for it, which is a shame. It really bugs me. But Mega Man X4. Let's talk about X4. The first game on the PlayStation 1. Yeah, they moved from Super Nintendo to PlayStation 1, which was interesting, but it kind of makes sense. X4 I really like. I think this actually is a fantastic game. You can play as Zero this time, which was a big change. And I think in general X4 I like a lot because it was able to change a lot of things from like the Super Nintendo games, but it still felt like an X game. It still had that run and gun gameplay. The level design was still really great. You had a few interesting things going on. I mean, you had like Jet Stingray stage, which was all like the whole thing was a motorbike stage, but it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. In fact, the Mavericks in general I think are great. Magma Dragoon stage, you get like a ride armor, and that was really fun. The Mavericks are just really cool. There's more of a focus on story that's kind of I'm like, I don't know. I don't think the story's that great. The voice acting is terrible. So that kind of sucks. I think the PlayStation games, they focus way too much on storytelling, and this was the start of it. But the music in this game is phenomenal. I'm really surprised. I was really surprised by the music in this game, and I didn't get to play X4 until I did play it in the PlayStation era. Like my friend had a PS1 and he had this game. That's where I played it. I borrowed it a few times from him. But yeah, I was really surprised back in the day and now how good the soundtrack is. I think a lot of people actually really do like X4. I can definitely see why. It's definitely one of my favorites in the series. I'm just trying to think some of like the newer things. It is the easiest game in the X series. This game is ridiculously easy. In fact, the only thing that even remotely challenged me was the final boss. But I actually find the final boss more tedious than difficult. It's actually one of those final bosses that I really hate. This is one of those games where I'll get to the final boss and that's where I'll stop playing because I really don't find the final boss to be fun whatsoever. That's kind of a shame. It's a very easy game. Playing as Zero is fun. I actually still prefer playing as X, but it is cool how differently he plays. Obviously, he's focused on melee, and each move that he gets is different from X's moves. And this is a thing that goes back to the Zero series, but in terms of like Mega Man games, I just prefer playing with a character that has like ranged shots. Getting up close and personal with a sword, I find kind of it changes the gameplay, but not in a way I really like all that much. I know a lot of people really do love playing as Zero in these games and like the PlayStation X games, and I definitely think it can be fun, but I do always prefer playing as X. But still, it's a nice that that option's there, and it is completely optional to you, whether you want to play as X or Zero. So yeah, it controls fantastic, just like the Super Nintendo games. Really a nice surprise. It could have been one of those disastrous games, Mega Man X4, but yeah, they did a really great job with it. All right, guys. So yeah, I have noticed the video's gone on long. So yeah, this is going to be a three-part video. So stay tuned for part 2, where I'll talk about Mega Man X5, 6, 7, and 8.